Okay, I'm at my grinder now, and this is my setup. This is a hand-powered antique grinder fitted with a Norton friable stone, and I can give you a link to that. But it's a relatively coarse grit. I think it's probably 80. Coarser grit builds up less heat. So at this point, the whole idea is not to remove the temper of the steel by overheating it. If you're using a powered grinder, you have to be really careful not to overheat it. A trick that I use a lot of times is I keep my fingers really close, and if it's too hot for me to put my finger on, it's too hot. In this case, I cannot overheat it with this stone. That's why I love it. I can just work for an hour and not worry about overheating it. It's quiet, you know, it happens slow and like a power tool. So kind of like a hand plane, this works slower. Now the problem is I need some type of a bed or rest. Most grinders will have a rest. I really like this one. It's a Lee Valley. It's all articulated so I can get the angle I want. You can make this with a couple blocks of wood. This is one of my old ones. Just a couple blocks of wood, I could pivot it. And I really don't need any more than that. I can hold it basically with one hand using my fingers as sort of a guide and just go back and forth. And just keep your pinch there so you can always reset it at the right place. Nowadays, you know, I kind of go fancy. I've got this little rig here. I can insert my iron in there. I tighten it down with these two nuts here. And I set it to be perpendicular or 90 degrees to the stone. And that's it. I go back and forth while I crank with one hand, and I go back and forth with the other. Now, it's important to make sure I'm grinding at 30 degrees. So if you have some type of a protractor, what I did back in the day is I just made a bunch of different little jigs that I use with varying angles. And I could just put that on here and tilt this table until it's at 30 degrees. So I know it's at 30 degrees. So let's give this a go. Now my wheel is being turned into the tool. If you do have a choice on a grinder, and you can get a low-speed grinder, that would be better than a high-speed grinder. And I just continue to use the whole stone, going back and forth. And I'm going to show you my progress. Now, a little trick that I'm seeing, and you probably don't know, but as I'm grinding, when you see sparks coming over this top side, it means you're ground to the edge. So I see sparks here, but I don't see sparks here. Remember, it was crooked? So I'm actually looking at these sparks, and without even flipping this over, I'll know when I'm getting pretty close to the whole thing being ground. So I'm still not seeing sparks on the left side, but let's have a look at what's going on here. And you could clearly see how much material I have to remove. So basically this part is removed, and just barely the point here. This is about 1/8 of an inch removed. But I got a ways to go to correct this mistake they made, and periodically I'll check to make sure that's square and make any adjustments needed. Alright guys, let's see what we got here. So that really only takes a few minutes because I'm using a grinder. If I were trying to hone that on stones, it would obviously take me a lot longer. But this goes pretty quick. I'm just grinding to get to my desired angle. Again, you could use a protractor type thing. I have a very fancy little brass gauge that tells me, in fact, that I'm at 30 degrees. A little variance isn't going to hurt at all on there. So that's fine. Whatever method you want to get that ground to the right angle, do it. And of course, if you don't want a hollow grind, you just do it on the stones, which is going to be my next step. This will go very fast for me. If you're trying to redo this whole bevel and change an angle on the stones, it's going to take quite a long time. Again, once this is established, though, it becomes easier. So I don't need this anymore. I'm going to switch to a different jig, and I think Chris invested in one of these for you and Anthony both. It's a nice little jig. Basically, it's a rolly ball on here. You put your iron in, snug it up, and then you need to find the angle somehow. So you could do it with a protractor, you can do it a lot of different ways, but one way to do it is to make yourself a little jig like I have here, and basically I just put the honing guide up against the edge and push the iron until it contacts that point and tighten it, and I'm guaranteed 30 degrees. That measurement is about 1.5 inches. So if you have a similar gauge, you can just make yourself a little stop, and it's very easy to quickly repeat that 30 degrees. My system I use is this guy, and it rotates at 25, 35, 30, 20, 15, and basically I do the same thing. I put the iron up until it's touching this, lock it down, and it's ready to go. This is the one I'm using. This is also a Lee Valley. So for our sake, I'll use yours, since it's the same as you're doing. And basically now, all I have to do is polish the back, because I'm all done with my 1,000, so I'll go 6,000, 8,000. And I need to go through all the grits with the bevel. You can see my bevel's really nice. It's straightened it out, and it's completely across the edge. So I'm just going to double check that my angle looks right, and it does. And you could do this any way you like. I like to do it toward me. So I put a thumb on each side and a finger on the back, which is what drives it forward. So I'm pushing down with my thumbs, and now I'm pulling with my forefingers. Down with my thumbs, back, pulling with my forefingers. It also allows me to maybe put a little more pressure on one thumb versus the other, which we'll get into that more, but a very slight convex is nice on the angle, because then the corners don't dig in. But it's literally no more than a couple strokes with pressure on this thumb and a couple strokes with pressure on this thumb, and that will help to give you a little bit of a bevel. Of course, if you want it dead flat, you just keep it dead flat. So believe it or not, I'm checking my progress, and I'll describe, because you probably can't see what's going on, but I got a shiny spot at the bottom and none at the edge. So that means my angle's a hair too low. Maybe I ground it a hair too high, or for whatever reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to raise it up a hair and lock it back down, and I'm just going to pull a stroke or two to see if I get anything on that leading edge. Okay, so I think I had that adjusted correctly. Little spritz of water on here, and I'm now going to do my actual honing work now that's adjusted. So thumbs on there, push, pull, a little bit more on the right thumb, a little bit more on the left thumb, check my work. And when I look now, I have a shiny spot on the leading edge and on the very top of the bevel. That's all I need to do. I mean, that's 4 strokes. A lot more time is spent setting it up than actually honing it. That's the nice thing about a hollow grind. If it weren't hollow ground, I have to polish that whole bevel. So again, now I'm at a finer stone. 2, 3, 4. I'm going to push a little more on one finger, a little more on the other finger, check my progress. And I have a polish all the way across. It's a little heavier on one side than the other. That could be the inaccuracy of my roller guide. So I'm going to go a couple more strokes with a little extra pressure on the side where it's weak. And now I have the back to do as well. Because remember, I took the back only up to 1,000. So I'm going to use all my stone. A lot of pressure down right now. I'm trying to keep it flat. I'm even going to use the end of my stone. Some people like a circular pattern. Some people go back and forth. And let's inspect that. You notice I have to do more on the back because there's more metal here to flatten. I still got a little low spot in this bad corner, but the other side looks spectacular. So I'm going to work the back a little bit more. Okay, so I've polished the back to where I'm going to say that's enough. I feel like it's still a little low in this corner. I don't feel that's going to hurt me too much, and I know that through future sharpenings, this is going to continue to polish and get better and better and better with time. So that's it. So I've got my front honed. I'm just going to give it one more quick push on here in case I created a burr. The common thought is when you're sharpening on one side, you're curling a burr up on the other, so you need to sort of drag to get that burr off. That's why you flip back and forth between sides when you're sharpening. So that's it. Now I'm going to go to my 8,000 water stone, which is really fine. And this is called a Nagura stone. You don't need to use it, but it creates a little slurry because the stone doesn't create a lot of slurry. So again, I'm going to work on my back. It's the most time-consuming part. Get the back going. And this will give me a mirror-like polish. Really, really fine. Sharper than a razor blade if you look at it under a microscope, actually, So there's just no serration in it. It's all polished. You can see that shine on there. Now I'm going to go after the front. And again, it's only going to take a few strokes. So I'm very careful, nice and even. A little more pressure on one side, a little more pressure on the other side. That's giving me a slight, very slight dish. And then again, I'm going to drag on the back in case I pulled any kind of a little burr. And that's about as sharp as you could ever want anything right there. I'm going to call that deadly sharp. Just missing a hair there. Now, one last little tip. I do like to knock these corners off because they'll sometimes leave a trail. And to do that, I use the edge of my stone so I don't bugger it up. And I basically just drag with no pressure down and roll. Same on this one. Drag and roll. And that was my coarsest grit. And that just knocks these corners off a little bit. Pop it out of the jig. Clean it up really good. You want to make sure that you get all that water off here. Blow it off. Wax it even if you want, because you don't want it to... And the best way, the safest way to check, and you get used to it, but if you take a thumbnail and this catches, it doesn't skirt over your nail. Like if it catches, and that's definitely catching, that's deadly sharp right there. If it slides over your nail, you need to do some more work. And of course, you know, like in this case, you can just absolutely just shave with it without a problem. That's sharp. Next step, we're going to tune up that plane. Okay, so here we are. It's a beautiful plane all set here. So I'm going to load it in here. And this has notches in the back. So I want to engage this tooth with these notches. And I have some adjustment in or out depending on the throw of this knob. This knob right here moves my iron in, or in this case right now I'm moving it out by dialing it down. So I'm going to try and put it in the middle, and if I can just move it forward one notch just to see what that feels like. So that looks good. I'm trying to make sure that when I have this knob all the way down, my iron comes out, and so I think I have to go one more back right there. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to lock it in. Throw this cam, puts pressure on it. Tweak this screw a little bit. You want a good fair amount of pressure on that guy. And then I'm going to bring it outward until I see or feel that iron. Now, some guys will sight this. I like to see it and I like to feel it. Do it how you like. But you just want to have that just slightly proud. And I mean just slightly. So I'm going to get it close to a starting point, and then we're going to get a block of wood. And I feel it more on this side than I do on this side. So I'm going to throw my lateral adjustment lever toward the high side, which will bring it down until you get a nice even feel. Let me go get some wood. Sweet, found this little stick of cherry. Real quick on the wood, you always want to be cutting with the grain. That means this grain is rising, so I want to go with that rise. If I go against, the plane's going to dig in, and it'll become evident really quick. Think of it like petting a dog. You don't pet a dog from its tail up to its head because you're going against the fur. You pet them from the head down to the tail. So when you're planing, pet the dog. So pet the dog. So I've got this kind of dialed pretty close, actually, and because it's all new, I'm going to use quite a bit of paraffin the first, couple months probably using it. I'm monitoring the shaving, so I'm looking for a full shaving. So if it's cutting more on one side than the other, I won't get a full shaving. So I'm pretty close. That's a beautiful little shaving. Now I'm going to say you pretty much can't feel the iron. That's how this is dialed in. So don't feel like you got to have it poking out much. You don't want a big coarse chip. You want this fine little shaving. Yeah, nice. Paraffin, love it. There's a low spot in the middle. I don't know if you can tell, but beautiful. Look at those. Light, wispy. You can see right through them. Nice to use. This feels really good in my hand. These are awesome for chamfering an edge. You could work an edge. You can also work the end. Just remember, plane off the grain always. You don't want to be planing like this because you're going to break this out. So there's little tricks to all of that. But get to this point, and then we'll go into tricks and tips on planing. That's a nice tool. I'll be sending that to you guys. Okay, boys, let's take a second and make sure we're clear on this whole angle thing. It's the most confusing part. So this is a low angle block plane that I'm going to be sharpening this iron. This is a traditional plane. The part that holds the iron in this is called the frog. I'll send you a link on terminology of what all these parts are, but the frog holds this iron at 45 degrees. This is bevel down, so its cutting angle is 45 degrees. Look at the diagram I drew. This is a low angle plane, and its bedding angle that you could see by using a measuring device of some kind is about 15 degrees. It's bevel up, and that bevel's at 30. 30 plus 15 makes 45. So in a nutshell, both of these are cutting at 45 degrees because the bevel is up, adding more. Bevel is down, but it's bedded at 45. Okay, a quick lesson in bevel up, bevel down. This is a low angle block plane. It's bedded, it sits on a bed of about 15 degrees. The bevel is up and it's ground to 30, giving it a cutting angle of 45. This is a bevel down plane, like a bench plane. The bevel's on the bottom side. The frog, which is what the blade or the iron is bedded on, is at 45 degrees. Because there's no bevel, it's cutting at 45 degrees. It does not matter what angle I grind this at, it's cutting at 45 degrees. So they're both cutting at the exact same angle. So what's the advantage? A bevel up plane is driving into your work at a lower angle, and you could make the case that it's more powerful and less likely to chatter. As the blade is pushed into your work higher, there's more chance of chatter or vibration. The other thing is, I can change the cutting angle simply by honing at a different angle. Doesn't matter what I do over here, I cannot change the cutting angle. That's it. Bevel up or bevel down. Choose your weapon, but they're both cutting at the same angle.